Chapter 74. I thought I'd never sleep, but I must have dozed off at some point, because I jerked awake, my heart racing. Something's wrong! Why was I thinking that? What had woken me? Was it... Fevronia was no longer on the other pillow. She must have jumped off. Maybe that was what had woken me up. Oh, and my phone screen was glowing. I reached down and grabbed it, my fingers brushing against the handle of the knife I'd shoved half under the bed. Why did I have a knife? Oh, right. I held up the phone, squinting at the too bright screen. 3:47 a.m. I'd gotten a respectable amount of sleep. There was a message from Dima. I opened it. "Ina," I read. "I talked to Vadim. He's in America. I think he's in Georgia, where you are. He's obsessed with some girl named Madison. Do you know who she is?" "Yes," I wrote back. "She's here with me now." "Okay. I think Vadim is coming after her. I couldn't convince him not to. I think he's on his way there right now. You need to get ready." "How?" I wrote. "Do you trust the police?" "Yes." "Call them, and don't let anyone in until they get there. And keep your knife handy. I'm going to try to call Vadim again, talk some sense into him." "Okay, I'll call them now." I dialed 911, then hesitated for a moment. What if this was all an embarrassing misunderstanding? But no, it probably wasn't. And even if it was, better to be embarrassed than shot or knifed or otherwise horribly killed. When I explained to the woman at the other end of the call what was happening, she promised to send a squad car around to check on it. She didn't sound super urgent. Maybe that was how she always talked. The police would be here soon, I told myself. Hopefully, soon enough. I got up. I'd wake Madison up just in case, I decided. Better to miss a little sleep than to be surprised by a dangerous home invader. When I padded over to her makeshift bed, though, she was already awake. "Something doesn't feel right," she whispered. "Can you sense it?" "No, but Vadim might be on his way." "Shit!" The words came out in a strangled hiss. She crawled out of her bedroll. We were both in t-shirts and running shorts, the nightgowns of champions. At least our movements wouldn't be hindered if we had to fight or flee. "I need a weapon," she whispered. "Do you have a gun? I wish I had a gun." "No gun," I whispered back. "You could go get a knife or a frying pan." She weighed the options. "Knife," she decided. "But I'll set the frying pan out within easy reach. Do you hear something? Something isn't right, I swear it." "Don't move. Let me listen." We both froze, trying not even to breathe. At first, all I could hear was the blood rushing through my veins. I let myself take a breath. Now all I could hear was my own breathing, and Madison's, and... "Is that a third person breathing?" I whispered. We held our breath again. Nothing. There was just the faintest hint of a sigh. It could have been a stray gust of wind. It could have been my imagination. Or it could have been someone trying to breathe very softly despite being out of breath. Madison and I stared at each other in the dark. By the blue light coming in from the parking lot through the blinds, I could see the white staring all the way around her eyes. I probably looked the same. "Is he inside here?" she whispered. We went absolutely still again, straining to listen some more. There was another soft sound, like someone shifting position, from the door. Madison and I looked at each other again. "I think he's on the other side of the door," I whispered into her ear. She nodded, the movement almost imperceptible. Then we looked at each other some more. I could see the question in her eyes as clearly as if she'd spoken it out loud. What did we do? Confront him? Scream bloody murder? Take shelter in the bathroom? I had just decided that the last option, taking shelter in the bathroom, was the best choice, when another soft sound came from the direction of the door. The sound of someone ever so gently trying the doorknob. Madison gulped hard, like she was swallowing back a desperate shriek. There were some more soft sounds coming from the doorknob. Very gentle scraping and clinking sounds, like someone fumbling with a key. Or, I thought with a thrill of horror that made every nerve ending on my body scream in pain, like someone picking a lock. The security chain is in place. But I'd heard so many times that security chains were basically useless for stopping a determined intruder. A clever doorbreaker could unhook them from the outside, and a strong one could burst through them. I have to confront him. The thought was very unwelcome. I'd been about to drag Madison back into the bathroom and lock us inside. But then it had occurred to me that it probably wouldn't do much good. If the person out there was willing and able to pick my front door, a little bathroom lock wasn't going to stop him. And if he was really ruthless, he could shoot us through the door. It was just hollow wood, and we'd be trapped in there. We needed to stop him from ever coming into the apartment at all. Maybe we can scare him off. If I called out to him, would that drive him away? He'd been trying to be quiet so far. Maybe the threat of a little noise would send him packing. It was worth trying. I had to try it. I opened my mouth. The only thing that came out was a sad, strangled croak. I cleared my throat and tried again. Vadim? I hissed. Vadim, is that you? Then I said it in Russian for good measure. No response, although I could no longer hear the tiny clinking and scraping noises coming from the doorknob. I listened hard. No sound of retreating footsteps either. After a moment, the clinking noises started again. Vadim! I said more loudly. I used Russian to make sure that he understood. I know you're there! I've called the police! The lock-picking noises went silent again. I called the police, I repeated. They'll be here soon. There was a loud thud and the door jumped on its hinges. He'd changed from picking the lock to kicking the door down. I tried to convince myself that it was a new door and it could withstand even a determined assault. There was another loud thud and it jumped on its hinges again. My confidence in its ability to protect me faltered. I have to go over there. I needed to brace the door. And maybe I could talk to him, talk some sense into him. I needed to go over to the door. But my feet were frozen. I couldn't make them move me towards the door, towards danger. All they wanted to do was run, run, run as far and as fast as they could. But there was nowhere to run to. The only way out was through the door that Vadim was currently trying to kick down. Hey! Madison's voice cracked. She gulped and tried again. Hey, Vadim! I know it's you! It's me, Madison, your cousin! The cousin you've been looking for! That's why you're here, isn't it? To come get me? The door stopped jumping on its hinges. Surely we'd woken up my neighbors. Surely someone would have called the police by now. Maybe a second call would get them to come out here at top speed. Madison. The voice on the other side of the door was youngish, male, Slavic. He was speaking English, but with a heavy accent that only strengthened that chocolatey timbre that people loved so much. Madison, why you do this thing? Madison, you... He trailed off, then switched to Russian and said, Madison, you betrayed your mother, your family, and your people. How could you do this? Madison looked over at me questioningly. Her Russian probably wasn't good enough to understand everything he'd said. I tried to force myself to speak, to translate his words for her, but my mouth wouldn't open. I couldn't seem to get air out of my lungs and through my larynx. Suddenly, I felt so tired. I was tired of all of this. I was tired of struggling and fighting to get by, and I was tired of being surrounded by fuck-ups and gangsters and extremists. And I was tired, so mortally tired, of people wanting to hurt me for something someone else had done. More than anything in the world, all I wanted to do was turn around, throw myself face down on my bed, and never move again. Let Vadim come get Madison. Who was she to me, anyway? A student I'd had for one semester who'd almost gotten me killed once and might be about to get me killed again. That didn't make sense. Whatever. What did any of it matter? None of it mattered at all. If I exhibited superhuman strength, speed, cunning, and courage, and saved Madison by defeating Vadim in single combat, in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't matter. Madison would probably still go on to be a drug-addicted screw-up who wasted her life on stupid pleasure-seeking. Vadim would still carry on being a neo-Nazi white supremacist, hurting others in the name of truth, freedom, the American way, democracy, European values, or whatever jingle they were using now. Even if I got him arrested, he'd probably just get released again. Even if I killed him, the movement would carry on, stronger than before, with him as a martyr and me as a murderer. I'd complete my descent into the dark side of what I'd always wanted to be, and all our lives would be ruined. I should just give up now, leave it to other people, and not care about the outcome. My phone, which I'd stuffed into the pocket of my running shorts, buzzed against my hip and lit up, causing me to emit an eerie green glow in the darkened room. Mechanically, wearily, hopelessly, I pulled it out, my fingers barely able to hold onto it. It was a call, a video call, from Dima. Chapter 75. Answer or don't answer? Answer or don't answer? I answered. If he was calling at 4 a.m, he must have a really, really good reason. Ina, where are you? In my apartment, I told him, with Madison, and Vadim is at the door. I thought so, fuck his mother. I tried to talk to him earlier, but he wouldn't take my call. Can he hear us? Probably, I said. Hold the phone up to the door. I want to talk to him. I held the phone up towards the door, although I was still too afraid to get any closer to it. Or too apathetic. Dima's attempts to talk to Vadim were doomed to failure. I was sure of it already. I really should have gone and locked myself in the bathroom and curled up in the bathtub. At least that way I would already be lying down when the bullets from the gun I was sure Vadim was carrying pierced my flesh. Cleanup would be expedited, too. Of course, I probably wouldn't have to worry about that, but my mom or my grandma might. I was able to summon up a flicker of feeling for them. If I was horribly slaughtered in my own apartment, would they have to go through my things and clean up the bloodstains in order to get my deposit back? Probably. Maybe I should try to stay alive in order to spare them that. Vadim, Dima said. Vadim, do you hear me? Silence from the other side of the door. Vadim, Dima shouted. Answer, you lousy fascist motherfucker. Or what? Came Vadim's voice from the other side of the door. Even in the middle of the night, through a door he was trying to break down so he could attack me, I could hear the charisma that had made him an internet icon the world over. Right now, it made him even scarier. "You'll scold me like a naughty schoolboy, right?" He was calling to Dima. "Ooh, I'm so scared. I'm shitting my pants right now. I fought your kind in Kiev, in the Donbass. I faced them down and I killed them, the fucking imperialist murderers. But now I'm going to do whatever you say because you're shouting at me? Of course, of course. You Moscow men are all the same. You think the world belongs to you." "If I'm not mistaken," Dima said, "you lived for a long time in Moscow yourself. In fact, I believe you still technically have Moscow residency. So, as one Muscovite to another." "I am not a Muscovite." Vadim's voice was growing increasingly agitated, losing its polish of confidence and cleverness that gave it such a sheen. Surely this was waking up the neighbors. Surely the police were going to show up at any moment. Surely this whole ridiculous farce would end soon, and I could go back to bed without actually having to do anything. "Sure," said Dima. "You know, the Westerners and the Lviv liberals like to talk about how the Nazis doing all the fighting and killing and dying for them are actually Russians. Because, subtext, that's all Russians are good for. The dirty work that these European intellectuals don't want to spoil their soft, white hands with. I used to think they were talking a bunch of shit. But then I met you, and I realized they weren't completely lying. All these Westerners and holier-than-thou liberal intellectuals are panting to lionize you, throw their panties at you like you're John Lennon, as long as you mouth the words they want to hear and take out their shit. Face it, Vadyusha, you're being used. I know you are, because I've been used to do other people's dirty work myself. I've even thought of going down your path and making my living by trash-talking Russia to the Western press that's just drooling for the kind of stories I could tell. We both might hate to admit it, but we're the same. Right down to our blood and bones. After all, you're practically as Russian as I am. And I bet you've got some Jewish blood, even some Tatar blood, just like I do. You're a steppe mongrel just like me. You just despise yourself too much to admit it." "Fuck you." Vadim's voice was distinctly poisonous now. "You know, I think I'm going to fuck your girlfriend. I bet she'll enjoy it, too. It'll be a nice change from your limp Moscow Jew boy pencil dick." Probably I should speak up now, defend Dima's figurative and literal manhood. I should at least intervene before Dima got us all killed even faster than we were going to get killed already. He had always been better at confrontation than common ground and de-escalation. But I couldn't summon up the courage or the caring or anything. Even the thought of being raped by a crazed neo-Nazi couldn't summon up more than a faint feeling of ugh. And seriously, where were the police? Why was I still having to stand here and listen to this? "Vadim." Dima's voice was hard and serious now. "Listen to me very, very carefully. I was speaking honestly when I offered you a chance to tell your story. As God is my witness, I will interview you and write what you say and make you sound at least semi-sane. You say you're not a Nazi. You're a true patriot and son of Ukraine. Fine. Tell me about it. Tell me about it and let me publish the story in some big-time Western publication and let the public decide." "You're lying," said Vadim. "I'm not lying. And I'm lying even less when I tell you that if you harm even one hair on my fiancé's head, I will hunt you down, and I will rip your head from your spine and your skin from your body, and I will wear it as a trophy. You don't scare me. You don't do that kind of thing anymore. I'll bet you never did that kind of thing. And you don't have any backup, any protection. You'll never be able to get to me, let alone hurt me. I have friends in surprisingly high places, said Dima. How do you think I'm still alive? Not everyone at a certain brick red square in downtown Moscow hates me. And a lot of my former comrades in arms are still comrades in arms. We may not see eye to eye about everything, but I'll bet my life they'd still love to come help me out with something like this. You're lying. Vadim spoke loudly, but he was sounding less and less certain. Good. Or was it bad? Was Dima just goading him into doing something even stupider and more violent? Where were the police? I'm not lying. Dima's voice was calm and flat. Come on, Vadyusha. Talk to me. Give me that exclusive interview I've been hounding you about for months. It'll help you out a lot more than attacking a couple of Americans. You don't want to fuck with the American police. I'm not afraid of the American police, Vadim insisted hotly. Compared to you guys, they're just a bunch of pussies. Maybe, said Dima. But what do you think will happen to you if you attack a couple of unarmed American women? In America, they have freedom of the press. It's a strange concept for both Moscow and Kiev, I know, so let me explain it to you. A journalist could decide to write a story about how you, the leader of an organization with murky Nazi ties and ill intent towards the American government, broke into an American woman's apartment and violently assaulted her. And no one would stop him. Then this journalist might start to say things like, should we really be sending all this money and guns to these people? Should we really be supporting this cause? Maybe these aren't the glorious heroes we thought they were. And babach! Instead of throwing him in jail, people in high places might start to listen to him. All those tasty American dollars, not to mention all that breathless Western adulation and those eager volunteers from all over the world, could dry up. You could go from being the toast of the free world to being just another group of grubby terrorists, like the Mujahideen. And all from you having a rush of blood to the head. So don't do it, Vadim. Just walk away. Walk away from the women and talk to me instead. Silence from the other side of the door. Then retreating footsteps. He's leaving! The relief was so great my knees actually went weak. My left knee twinged as I caught myself before I went down, and then started buzzing. The retreating footsteps stopped. Then they picked up speed and loudness. Why were they getting louder? Why? There was a loud thud, and the door jumped on its hinges, harder than before, like from the impact from a large, strong man throwing himself as hard as he could against it. Madison screamed. It's okay, I started to say. He can't actually kick the door down. She screamed again and grabbed at my arm, pointing with her other hand. I followed her pointing finger with my eyes. The doorknob was visibly looser and was rattling in its hole. He must be trying to pick it again. It looked like he was messing with the latch itself, not the keyhole. It was a spring lock. Spring locks, I thought hazily, could be opened with a credit card if they were facing the right way. Was my lock facing the right way? I had no idea. I couldn't bring up an image of it in my mind. "We should brace the door," I said, or tried to say. Madison didn't seem to hear me. I wasn't sure if the words had actually left my mouth. "We should try to brace the door," I said again. This time I was sure I had managed to make myself heard. Madison took a half step towards the door. I took a half step behind her. There was an ominous click. The door swung open. Chapter 76. Madison shrieked. Then she threw herself at the door, as if trying to close it. She made it just in time to get smacked in the face. She reeled back, clutching at her nose. "Ha!" said Vadim. He stepped inside. Good God, he was handsome. The sexiness that pulled people in on his YouTube videos was almost overpowering in person, even under such inauspicious circumstances. The sexiness was slightly spoiled by the gun he was holding out in front of him. An elegant little handgun, but deadly enough. All thoughts of tackling him fled. He swung the gun first towards Madison, then towards me. "Hands up," he told me. I put my hands up. In my right palm, my phone was warm, the tiny fan whirring. Dima must still be on the call. In my left palm, the handle of the knife I'd grabbed from the kitchen was slick with sweat. Vadim's eyes went wide when he saw it. Then he smiled. "Drop the knife," he ordered. He backed up the command with a sharp motion with the gun. I dropped the knife. "Good girl," Vadim said. He turned away from me to Madison, who had retreated into the corner and was huddled there, hands over her bleeding nose, a feral look in her eyes. "Madison," said Vadim reproachfully, "why did you betray your family like that? Your mother. You should know better. When I spoke with Brenda, she couldn't say who had tipped off the police. But when she told me how you were on the outs with her, I knew. I remembered what you are like, Madison. You were a difficult girl, an obstreperous girl, a disobedient girl, a girl who cares nothing for family, for homeland, for honor, when you were with us last summer. We tried to help you, but some people can't be helped. Maybe it is the corrupting effect of America. That is why I am going to take you back to Ukraine with me. Once you are with your people again, once you spend enough time with them, you will come to your senses." Madison stared at him blankly. He had been speaking Russian. She had probably only gotten one word in 5, if that. "Go Ukraine?" she finally managed to say in Russian, her American accent even more apparent than usual, her voice thick and clogged with tears and blood. "No, I no go, no!" She was shouting as loudly as she could through her bleeding nose. Where were the damn neighbors? Couldn't they hear us? Almost idly, I realized that Vadim had his back to me. He was so focused on Madison, he seemed to have forgotten me entirely. The door was still open. If I were quick and quiet, I could run out onto the landing before he stopped me. He might come after me, or he might not. It seemed like he cared more about Madison than me. I could escape from this completely unscathed and take shelter elsewhere to wait for the police to come deal with him. I didn't have to face this myself. I didn't have to face it at all. You can't abandon Madison. The thought was slow, sluggish, and distant, like it was putting up a token resistance and nothing more. And I wouldn't be abandoning her, another part of me argued. From outside, from safety, I could summon help more easily. It would be the smart thing to do. "You've already summoned help. It's not going to come any more quickly than it's coming." Vadim was stepping over to Madison, holding out his hand, almost as if he wanted to make peace with her. She eyed him balefully. He laughed. Then, as easily as if he were swatting at a fly, he slapped her open-handed across the face, hard enough that her head snapped to the side, spraying blood all over him and my off-white carpet. "There goes my deposit, unless I can get hydrogen peroxide into it real fast." "Come on," Vadim told her. He was speaking genially, as if he hadn't just hit her in the face. "Let's go. Let's go to your mom. I know she wants to talk to you. And then we'll go back home to your family, to your motherland. It will do you good." Madison shook her head, although I could tell she hadn't understood half of what he was saying. "No," she said loudly, first in English, then in Russian. "No, I know." Vadim laughed again and took her arm, gesturing at her with the gun in his other hand. He was holding it loosely, comfortably. It might be easy to knock out of his hand. Or not. He certainly looked like he knew how to use it. I'd probably do more harm than good if I tried anything. Vadim started to back up, dragging Madison with him. She struggled, crying out and clawing at his hand with her fingernails. He only laughed more and jerked at her, making her stumble towards him. "Ina." I jumped. "What? Where?" My phone. Dima was still on the call with me. And now he was whispering to me, trying to get my attention. Slowly, smoothly, surreptitiously, I lowered my hand, bringing the phone to my face. Vadim, occupied with Madison, didn't seem to notice. "Ina," Dima whispered. "You can stop him. Kick him in the balls." I eyed Vadim. He had his back to me, his legs braced apart as he tried to drag Madison towards him. I could indeed kick him in the balls, in theory. And if I missed, or my knee gave out on me, then he'd be pissed at me. "Kick him in the balls," Dima whispered. "Then hit him in the back of the neck. Then grab his gun if he drops it. Grab your knife. You can do it. Do it, now, before he turns around." Vadim had succeeded in pulling Madison over to him and was turning towards the door, ready to drag her out of the apartment. In a second, he'd be out of range. I had to do it now. The light from the phone was giving everything a strange, flickering, disco ball, horror movie glow. As smoothly as if I were doing forms, I pivoted on the bare ball of my left foot so that I was perfectly aligned with Vadim. Flicker. My right leg chambered for the kick. Flicker. Vadim paused, as if sensing danger. Flicker. My right leg unchambered and struck out. Flicker. My right instep flew between Vadim's spread legs and connected solidly with his groin. Flicker. He yelled in shock and pain. Flicker. He dropped Madison's arm and spun around to face me, even as his body crumpled up in a reflexive crouch. Flicker. His gun came up to point at me. Flicker. My right hand swung out, smooth and confident from all the hundreds of times I'd practiced this move, and knocked the gun out of his hand, sending it spinning through the air and into the kitchen. Flicker. Vadim launched himself at me, his handsome face distorted in a rabid snarl. Flicker. He slammed into me, making my left knee buckle and taking us both to the ground. Flicker. He had his hands around my throat. I scrabbled at them, my nails making no impression on his skin. Flicker. Light glinted off the blade of the knife I'd dropped. Flicker. I drove the nails of my right hand into his skin while my left hand let go of him and reached for the knife. Flicker. My left hand came up, operating as if on its own, and drove the tip of my knife into his right forearm. Flicker. Vadim screamed and stared at the knife in enraged horror. Flicker. He drew back his left hand and struck at my face. Flicker. I got my right arm up just in time to block his strike. The impact sent my phone sailing out of my hand and off into the darkness. Flicker. Vadim drew back his left hand again. Both my arms felt numb and slow. I wasn't going to be able to block him in time. Flicker. Madison screamed and grabbed at Vadim's back, stopping him from hitting me. Flicker. He shrugged her off and grabbed for my throat again with both his hands. Flicker. I tried to drive my nails into the backs of his hands. He didn't seem to feel it. Flicker. The flickering was growing worse. Was I blacking out? I couldn't get air. There was so much shouting. Dima was shouting. Madison was shouting. Someone else was shouting. Vadim's weight was dragged off me. I gasped for breath, choking and wheezing. Madison threw herself down beside me. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" She was crying frantically. I nodded, still not able to speak. Where was Vadim? There was so much shouting and struggling. What was going on? Light suddenly flooded the entrance. Someone had switched on the lights. Vadim was face down on the floor, his hands cuffed behind his back. Standing over him was Frank. Chapter 77. For a moment, I could only stare at him blankly, gasping in breath through my tortured throat. What? How? "You made it," I said, or tried to say. My memory, which had been totally subsumed by the moment-to-moment struggle to stay alive, returned, and I knew how and why Frank was here. My throat, though, still didn't want to talk. "You okay?" Frank asked. He looked over at Madison, apparently seeing her for the first time. "Both of you okay?" Madison and I nodded tentatively. "Good. Where the fuck are the local boys? They should be here by now." Right on cue, the green and white glow from my cell phone was cut by the harsher blue and red of police lights. Vadim started to struggle harder, bucking and writhing so that his whole body was bouncing off the ground with the agility of a breakdancer. "Stop it," said Frank. When Vadim didn't obey, he placed his foot firmly on Vadim's back between his shoulder blades, forcing him down onto the floor. "You're bleeding," Frank observed, looking over at me. "Your face is all bloody." I felt at my face. "It must be his blood." This time the words came out. They came out as a tortured rasp, but they were audible. "I stabbed him with a knife," I explained. Frank gave a low whistle. "Damn," he said. "I'm impressed. That why his right arm's all covered in blood." I nodded. That set my throat and neck to spasming in protest again. Frank bent down and gave Vadim's arm a cursory examination. "I don't think you're going to bleed out," he told him. "I don't even think you're going to have much of a scar. That knife wound's the least of your worries, believe you me." Heavy footsteps were coming up the stairs. In a moment, my apartment entrance was filled with what felt like the entire Greenfields Police Department, plus Xavier Thornton and at least one other FBI agent, plus Brian Michaels from Campus Police, plus, as they were carting Vadim away, Mel. "Row!" she shouted, pushing her way through the officers milling by the door. "Row, you okay? What happened?" "I'm fine," I croaked. "She's a friend," I told the officers, trying to stop her from coming in. "She's here to help me." It was agreed that she could come in to be with me. I had scooted over to sit with my back to the cabinet separating the kitchen from the rest of the apartment. Madison was huddled next to me, her arms around her knees, rocking slightly back and forth. Mel sat down on the other side of me, looking me over. "You look like shit," she said. And you've got blood on your face." "It's not mine," I told her. "It's Vadim's." "He the one?" she asked, nodding towards the door that Vadim had just been hauled out of. "Uh-huh." "Looks like you won in the end, though," she said. "I had some help," I told her. Mel looked over at Madison. I nodded. Then I nodded at Frank, who was talking animatedly with Brian Michaels and someone senior-looking in a Greenfields police uniform. Xavier Thornton had already left with Vadim. Mel gave Frank a look through narrowed eyes. "Is he the asshole from California?" she whispered. "Uh-huh," I whispered back. "But he came through when I needed him. And he's not the only one." I glanced down at my hands. I was still clutching my phone, which was becoming uncomfortably hot. Dima was still on the call. He hadn't left me. It must have been terrible for him to watch helplessly while others fought, but he hadn't left me, and he was still here. Chapter 78. By 6 a.m, the bustle around my apartment had mostly cleared away. I'd had to end the call with Dima around 5, when the battery was down to 10% and the phone itself was desperately blowing out a steady stream of overheated air. He'd made me promise to call him again later today, whenever I was ready. Mel sat with me until all the police had gone. Then she helped me to my feet. When I tried to stand, my left knee buckled beneath me. "Damn," I said. "There goes 4 months of healing down the drain." "It doesn't look as bad as before," Mel said. "Really?" "I don't know. I was just saying it to sound comforting. Did it work?" I flexed the knee experimentally. "Maybe. It doesn't hurt as much as before, at least. But it feels messed up. I don't think I can put much weight on it." I hobbled into the bathroom with Mel's support. When I stepped out of the shower, I found Fevronia peering out from under the sink. She must have spent the entire fracas hiding away there. Good. The best place for her. I gave her a scratch behind her ears. Instead of swiping at me, she purred. When I hobbled back into the front room, Madison was on the phone with her dad. "No, Dad, I'm fine," she was saying. "I'm, totally fine. There's no need for you to come get me." She paused. "Although, I might need some therapy later." Agitated words came over the phone. She let them go on for a few sentences, before cutting in with, "Fine, fine. Fly down to Atlanta and come get me if it matters so much to you. If you can find the time. Next week's the last week of the semester. Don't you have a lot of big, important meetings and stuff you've got to attend?" More agitated words on the other end of the call. Madison grimaced and held the phone away from her ear, looking over at me with almost comic despair. "I'm going to hand you over to Professor Halley, Dad," she finally said, interrupting the flow. "That way she can tell you directly how she feels about me being here." She held out the phone to me. I took it. "Rowena?" It was Eric Johnson. "Rowena, my God, are you all right? Madison is saying you were attacked. I've been trying to get the story from her, but I can't get a straight answer." "I'm fine," I said. "We're both fine. More or less." "More or less?" Eric repeated. "I may have re-injured my torn ACL," I said. "But in the grand scheme of things, we're both fine." "That sounds serious. You'll have to let me know if you need help with that. What happened?" I gave him a short abstract of the action, downplaying the physical danger and completely leaving out my own internal debate over whether or not to run from the scene and let Vadim take Madison. I reassured him again that Madison was not, as far as I could tell, physically harmed other than a bloody nose. The paramedics had checked her out on the scene and assured her it wasn't broken. It was unlikely, I said, that we were in any more danger, with Vadim and 2 of his cronies taken away, although I supposed the other 2 of the 5 who had come over to the U.S. could still be on the loose. Actually, Madison piped up from where she was sitting across the table. Xavier Thornton texted me while you were in the shower and told me they'd been picked up in New York at bright dawn. They showed up there as originally planned. And I think they picked up my mom as well. What? Eric shouted over the phone. Brenda's been arrested? She deserved it, Dad, Madison said coolly. Mother of God! It was my turn to wince and hold the phone away from my ear. When Eric calmed down, I said, So, it sounds like we're all safe now. Madison and I are fine. She's welcome to stay here as long as she likes. Whatever you guys decide. I'm coming down, Eric said firmly, on the first flight I can get out of Newark. I'll let you know as soon as it's booked. Hopefully, I'll be there by this evening. And when I get there, Rowena, we should talk. Chapter 79. Mel came back around 8 o'clock to see if I wanted a ride over to campus for class, or if I was planning to cancel and stay home. She was in favor of the latter. When have you ever canceled class? She asked. Leave a little. See what it's like on the dark side. Besides, you were up half the night fighting off crazed extremists, and now you can hardly walk again. You're not really in prime teaching shape, if you'll excuse my saying so. I know, I said, but I don't feel that bad. I really don't. If I cancel class, I'll just sit around here feeling anxious and miserable and fielding panicked emails from students. Easier just to go in and teach. Mel conceded that point and agreed to drive me over to campus and drop me off as close to Bedford as she could get. My knee, while not wrenchingly painful as long as I didn't twist it, was visibly swollen again and buckled every time I tried to put weight on it. I had to dig out my crutches, and when I stood at the top of the 2 long flights of stairs leading from my apartment to the parking lot, I almost rethought my decision and canceled class anyway. When I hobbled into the classroom, squinting against the migraine scotoma that had appeared as soon as I stepped into the building, all the students exclaimed over the crutches, demanding to know what had happened. I turned suddenly, I told them, with total, if not totally complete, truthfulness. Must have strained something. Hopefully it'll go away soon. Now, let's talk about what's going to be on the exam. When I hobbled out of Bedford 3 hours later, it was with the surreal sensation that you get after too much stress and not enough sleep. I was waiting near the door for Mel to bring the Jeep around when I saw Chloe on one of the benches nearby. Instead of being by herself, though, she was talking to Diane and Julie. All 3 of them were speaking animatedly, but with smiles on their faces, like they were enjoying each other's company. Well, look at that! Chloe has finally found friends amongst the tenured faculty. I debated hobbling over to say hi. I didn't want to end the semester without talking to all of them. But I didn't want to interrupt what looked like a great bonding moment between the 3 of them, either. Chloe looked up and caught sight of me. She lifted up her hand as if about to wave me over, then saw the crutches, froze, and said something to Diane and Julie. They all turned, surveyed the crutch situation, and came over to me. What happened? Asked Julie. Long story, I said, again with total, although not totally complete, truthfulness. Hopefully I won't be back on them for too long. Julie nodded, her nose wrinkled. Yeah! As I'm sure you know, campus is a nightmare to get around if you have any kind of mobility issues. I was on one of those scooter thingies for a month a couple of years ago after I cracked a bone in my foot. I found out really quickly just how many stairs there are in this place, not to mention doors you need 2 hands to get through. I brought it up with the college faculty and the administration at the time, and they basically said someone would have to bring a lawsuit to them over it for it to be worth doing something about. We don't have people here who have difficulty getting around campus, so what's the problem? She took a deep breath. I said, well, never mind. You get the picture. Anyway, we've got something now that the college is going to hate even more than their lack of ramps and accessible doors. Diane nodded. Some really gnarly samples from most of the buildings on campus, she said. Various varieties of mold that are known to be toxic, plus some really alarming levels of formaldehyde and PFAS, nasty chemicals. Oh, and a lot of the rooms have worrisome carbon dioxide levels in them during full occupancy. And I think I discovered at least one carbon monoxide leak. Now I was the one wrinkling my nose. Can't carbon monoxide kill you? It sure can, said Diane. Like I said, the college isn't going to like this one bit. We're looking at massive and very costly renovations if they decide to do anything about it. So we're forming a committee, Chloe put in, an ad hoc, unofficial committee on campus safety. Maybe if we work at it, we can push some change through before anyone gets seriously sickened. It's a problem all over the country that's starting to get some exposure, said Diane. So we figured now might be the time to convince the college that they don't want any bad publicity over this. Start renovations now, so they don't have to do them all at once, under the threat of legal action. I know it's a risky thing to do, said Chloe. I know it could get us in trouble, and I know I have the most to lose here. But it feels important. It's sad, but for the first time since I came to Crimson, I feel like I'm doing something important. And I've found other people who want to do something important too. It's nice, you know. I feel much more like a part of this campus now than I ever have before. That's great, I said. And if you'd like to join us, Rowena, you'd be welcome to, Diane said. I know it'd be particularly risky for you, but if you'd like to be an unofficial member, as it were, we'd be glad to have you join us. Yeah, I said. That sounds good. Chapter 80. You look surprisingly good for a woman who almost got killed last night, Mel said when I climbed into the Jeep. I'm feeling hopeful, I said. Maybe it's the beautiful Advent season. Mel looked expressively out the window, where a December rain had just started. December wasn't the prettiest month in this part of the South. No snow, but plenty of cold rain and sleet, along with inadequate heating. Or the end of the semester, I said. We made it through another semester. That's a triumph, right? And you're about to start treatment, which is hopeful, right? And it looks like Chloe is starting to feel comfortable here, and my brother's life is looking up. And maybe mine is, too. Is that so? Said Mel, giving me another expressive look. How so? I shrugged. It just feels hopeful. Well, I guess I'll take that. Lord knows we could all use some hope right about now. And you're right. I am excited about starting treatment, horrible as it's supposed to be. At least I'll be doing something. And hopefully once I'm through the bad bit, I'll start feeling better and better. And Karen, to my immeasurable surprise, hinted that they might want to keep me here for another year. And I've got an interview coming up next week. She cleared her throat. For another job in L.A. Do you still want to move back to L.A.? I asked. Mel's ex-girlfriend lived in L.A. Now she shrugged. I don't know, but I like the idea of having options. I kind of feel like I've got a lot of options opening up in front of me right now. Not all of them are going to be pleasant, but I've got them, and that's the main thing. You know, after the election, I was pretty much in despair. I'm sure on Inauguration Day I'll be in despair again. But right now, I feel like there's stuff I can do. Life isn't over. It's still possible for good things to happen. Yeah, I said, it is. At the complex, Mel helped me up the 2 tall flights of stairs to my apartment, and Madison opened the door for me. Mel gave Madison a critical once-over and said, "Nice shiner, kid. Makes you look tough." Madison almost bridled for a moment, but then burst into a big grin. Ouch, shit, that hurts. But it does, make me look really tough, doesn't it? You know, I've never had any kind of a real injury before. My mom tried to get me to go skiing, but I never really liked it enough to hurt myself, and I wasn't allowed to do other stuff. But now I've got a black eye from an actual fight. Pretty cool, huh? Damn straight, said Mel, and held up her fist for a fist bump. Madison enthusiastically complied, staggering back slightly when her fairly anemic swing connected with Mel's rock-solid stance. Mel laughed and told her they'd have to practice if Madison stuck around. Then Madison filled us in on a call she'd just had from Xavier Thornton, who, she said, was feeling bad about leaving us to be attacked by Vadim, and was trying to make up for it by feeding Madison as much information as he felt he could legitimately release. Madison's mother had been arrested, along with the other 2 men from Glorious Future and the entire Bright Dawn staff. A large stockpile of weapons had been discovered, suggesting that they had indeed been planning something nefarious. It was currently believed that they'd been planning to attack the Obamas, the Clintons, or the Carters during the inauguration events. Or maybe they just hoped to spread some mayhem and terror. So it's good I pissed Vadim off so much he came after us, Madison concluded. Right? Because that way it was all discovered. She felt at her bruised nose. I kind of wish we could have done it without me getting, punched in the face, but whatever. A small price to pay for glory, right? Right, I said. And you did what you said you wanted to do, too. You saved my ass. Only after almost getting you killed again. And I did a shit job of it. Vadim might have come after me anyway, I told her. And you jumped him at just the right moment. You came through when it mattered. Madison grinned and then clutched at her nose. Oh, and my dad's got to get here tonight, she said through her fingers. He's booked rooms at a hotel, and he wants me to get ready to check in with him when he gets here. I told him I wanted to stay here, but he said... Her voice took on a faux, stuffy male tone. You've trespassed on Professor Halley's kindness too long. Or some shit like that, and I'm supposed to sit tight until he gets there and then go straight over to the hotel with him. Whatever you want to do, I said. I want to stay here, she said, rolling her eyes. But maybe I need to be with my dad. I think he's pretty upset about the whole thing. He's all broken up about my mom getting arrested. Besides, this way I can flash my shiner at him and make him feel guilty. She grinned some more at that. Great plan, I said. Yeah, is someone coming up the stairs? For all her bravado a moment ago, Madison was shrinking in on herself at the thought of someone coming to the door. Hang on. I went over to the peephole and looked out it. It's just Frank, I said. I opened the door before he could knock. Good to see you up on your feet, Row. He tried to give me a raking elevator eyes up and down, but it fell rather flat. He looked like someone who'd been on a red-eye flight from California, gotten into a fight upon arrival, and then spent all morning at the police station. His normal air of a vigorous clan chieftain was much more muted than usual. "Thanks. Want to come in?" He looked through the door at Mel and Madison and visibly hesitated. "Or we could go for a walk," I said. He looked down at my knee and up at my face and quirked a brow. "Let's go for a drive," he said. "You can show me this campus I've heard so much about. And I can fill you in on how everyone's doing back in California." "I've got to go shopping," Mel said. "I bet Madison has some stuff she needs to get too. Why don't we go do that now?" "I don't need," Madison began. "I'll bet Rowena needs groceries," Mel said, cutting her off. "What with the two of you here and her having a busted knee and all. Let's go grab some stuff for her right now, before the store gets hit by the after-school crowd." Madison looked like she was going to protest again, but when Mel jerked her head at her, she followed her out the door, giving Frank a curious glance as she passed him. He nodded courteously at her in response, which seemed to only stoke her curiosity further. "This place looks a lot different during the day," said Frank, looking around the entrance as he stepped through the door. "Funny, isn't it? It seemed like some scary cave or something supernatural last night. But it's just a cheap apartment. Sorry, didn't mean to..." "No worries," I said. "It is a cheap apartment. That's its main glory." "Did you get the blood off the carpet okay?" I looked down. "I left Madison with a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, a roll of paper towels, and instructions on how to use them. Judging by the pink wet spots, she took a stab at it, but didn't get very far." "Yeah, kids, right? You don't have any of your own, right?" "Nope," I said. "Me neither. Funny. A lot of my buddies ended up with kids they didn't want, from relationships they shouldn't have had. But I never did. At first, it seemed like I was the smart one. Now, I wonder." "Yeah," I said. "Anyway, you need to sit down. You look like you're about to fall over." "Sure," I said. We both took seats at the table. "So," said Frank, "lots to talk about." He gave me one of those surprisingly shrewd looks he could deploy upon occasion. "Alex is doing well, by the way. I told him I was going to see you. I made it clear it was to help out with the FBI stuff." He smiled thinly. "I don't think he was too happy about it, even so." "Oh," I said. "Yeah. Anyways, lots to talk about, like I said. I don't even really know where to begin. So maybe let's start with the big stuff." He gave me another one of those shrewd looks. "Let's talk about your boyfriend." Chapter 81. "Which boyfriend?" I said. Then I really wished I hadn't said it. Especially not like that. Frank's eyes were crinkled up in suppressed laughter. "Good for you, Ro. I didn't think you had it in you." "I don't," I said. "I just don't actually have a boyfriend right now that I'm aware of. So you must be referring to an ex. And I have more than one of those, I suppose." He sobered up. "Yeah, I guess so. And you're probably thinking I want to talk about Alex. I still see the guy, you know." He smirked. "Guess that came out wrong, too. You know what I mean. I still keep in touch with him, see him around sometimes. It seems only right. And he's doing okay, I guess. But he could be doing better. You were a good influence on him, you know that? Of course, I'm sure you're a good influence on anybody. Anyway, he's still working, still holding it together as far as I can tell, but he's not looking too happy. Still trying to help Erin get her shit together. Only she doesn't want to get her shit together, So now both of them are in the shit together. Uh-huh. I wished I hadn't sounded so cynical when I'd said that. As Frank had remarked before, I didn't like Erin. From my perspective, she'd jerked around Alex for years, even after they were no longer together, even after he was with me and she was with Frank, and it had turned out another man as well. It was extremely hard for me not to say some very harsh things about her that would go against my policy of sisterly feminist solidarity. Frank's eyes were crinkled up in a smile again. That may be the most unkind thing I've ever heard you say, Ro. And you didn't even say anything. Uh-huh, I said. His smile widened. I told you that you were bad. Glad to have some visual proof of it. Or whatever that was. Sure, I said. I'd argue that I should get a pass on Erin, but how you treat your enemies really is the ultimate test of morality. Or one of them, anyway. I'm sorry Alex isn't doing as well as he could be. I take it Erin isn't either. He was shaking his head, still grinning. Nope. I wouldn't be surprised if she finds herself seeking other employment soon. And Noel, the other man in Erin's life, is still stringing her along, messing her up and leaving it for Alex to pick up the pieces. He's doing it, but one of these days he's going to get tired of it. Like I already did. She's already come crying back to me a couple of times, but I sent her packing. Oh, I said. It's the best thing for her, he said. I know it seems cruel, but as long as people keep cleaning up her messes, she's never going to learn how to take care of herself. If she ever can, I said. Tough love sounds attractive, especially when aimed at her, but it only works some of the time. Fair enough, he said. That was an awfully agreeable statement for him to make. I thought about asking him if he'd been hit on the head during his altercation with Vadim. Instead, I said, So if it's not about Alex, which boyfriend do you want to talk to me about? Your Russian one, our boy Vadim's pal. He's not my boyfriend, I said reflexively, and he's not friends with Vadim. I'm sure of that if I'm sure of anything. Maybe friends is the wrong word, said Frank. Associates might be better, but they know each other. I know, I said. He knows a lot of bad guys, said Frank. True, I said. Which is good for us, but maybe bad for you. Oh, I said. Yeah, you still haven't gotten your security clearance, have you? I shook my head. The hiring process seemed to be going pretty well at first, I said. But the last time I heard from them was a couple of months ago, and they said they were bogged down in the security clearance, and I shouldn't expect to hear from them for a while. He nodded. Yeah, figured as much. Damn it. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you, but with these connections you have with this Kuznetsov fellow, it'll be tough for you to get cleared. And you'll probably have to cut off ties with him, or with a lot of your other Russian friends, or both. Oh. I'd known that was a possibility. That was one of the reasons I'd resisted applying for any kind of a job that required a security clearance. I'd just been desperate, and had thought that my future lay in America, with Americans, and I'd decided to give it a go. By the look on your face, Frank said, you're not ready for that. I thought I was, I said, but things might have changed. Yeah, I get that. You were all set to hook up with an American and hopefully move out to California. Then that all went to hell. For what it's worth, he quirked one side of his mouth. If you're still interested in hooking up with an American and maybe moving to California, I might be able to help you out with that. Thanks, I said, but I wonder how serious you'd be about it if I actually showed up at your doorstep, saying I was ready to take you up on that offer. In my experience, lots of people say they'd like to get together and start a life together, blah, blah, blah. But when push comes to shove, they run. Frank gave me an appraising look. That unexpected shrewdness filled his eyes. Yeah, and I might have done the same thing a time or two myself. I'd like to say I've grown out of it, but no one's ever put me to the test. He shrugged, a little half-smile on his face that suddenly made him look much younger. I guess if you wanted to put me to the test, I'd let you. But maybe you're right to be wary. I don't really have the best track record. That's okay, I said. Neither do I. So I'm not sure either of us should put each other to the test just yet. Fair enough, said Frank. We can just keep it as Plan B. I said. Sure. He grinned, still looking unexpectedly shrewd. I'm not going to take that as a yes, or even a maybe. But keep it in mind, okay? It might go better than you think. Sure, I said. He grinned wider. I'm hurt. That was damn near sarcastic. I didn't mean it that way, I said. He wagged a finger at me. I know, but deep down, you're bad, Ro, and it has to come out somehow. If sarcasm with me is what gets you off, well, so be it. You could even tell yourself you're not being bad. Since I'm so bad myself, it's okay to treat me like that. That's not how I roll, I said. I paused for reflection. I hope not, I added. That's not how I intentionally roll, anyway. That, said Frank, is maybe the most sickeningly goody-goody thing I've ever had anyone say to me with a straight face. And I think you meant it, too, which is the worst part. I don't know how you put up with this Kuznetsov fellow. I really don't. We're both kind of goody-goody, I said. Now the look he was giving me was narrow, sideways. He's not a goody-goody kind of person, Ro. Well, I said, maybe in some aspects, no, but... But nothing, Ro. He walks on the fucking dark side, and this is me saying that. Well, I said, maybe in the past. I'm not talking about his fucking past, Ro. I've been reading up on him. He's become a person of interest, you might say. To the U.S. government, since he's applied for a visa to come over here, and to me personally, since you're mixed up with him. And he's a hero, I get that. The kind of Russian opposition figure you liberals like to go gaga about. I said, that's not... yeah, I suppose so, but that's not why I... Listen, Frank cut me off, his voice hard and intense. He's mixed up with some bad people. I don't just mean his old comrades, or the people back in Moscow who'd love to take him out. I mean people like Vadim. People with one foot in the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or C-14 or the Aryan Brotherhood or some shit like that, and the other foot high up in Kremlin politics. Bad people. Bad people who could kill you as soon as look at you. I know, I said. I know that very well. And you don't fuck around with people like that. You don't fuck around with people like that because they'll kill you as soon as look at you. And you don't fuck around with people like that because before you know it, you're one of them. Believe me, I know. Yeah, I said. I believe you, and I know. I've been careful, and I'll go on being careful. It might not be enough. Frank's face was set in grim lines. You were careful here, weren't you? and this fuckface Vadim still broke into your apartment and damn near killed you." "Maybe I wasn't careful enough," I said. "I didn't take it seriously until it was actually happening." "You took it seriously enough to call me, didn't you? You took it seriously enough to lock yourself in your apartment and set out weapons. That's about as seriously as an amateur like you can take it, Ro. I don't mean that in a bad way. But you are an amateur. You're in over your head here, and he's the one pushing you under, whether he means to or not." "I guess," I said. "You don't guess," Frank told me. "You know. You know I'm right, don't you? You know he's mixed up in bad stuff, and you know he's bringing it down on you. You just don't want to run away." "No," I said. "I don't. I've done a lot of running away. Sometimes it saved me. And I thought about doing it again this time. I really did. Sometimes you have to run for your life. But sometimes you have to stand and fight. And I think I've come to the standing and fighting part of my journey." Frank stood up. "I can respect that," he said. "Sometimes that's what you gotta do. I get that. And if you need help standing and fighting, you call me, okay? It's one of the few things I'm pretty good at." "I'm sure you're good at other things," I said, standing up too. "But I know you're good at standing and fighting. And whenever I've seen you run, you've always been running towards me in order to save me. Maybe someday I'll be able to come running in order to save you." Frank grinned. "I sure hope so. That'd be something to see. And thanks, Ro. Hearing I'm a hero from someone like you means a lot." He leaned over and put his arms around me. He felt solid and strong and incredibly attractive, just as I'd known he would. He almost groped my ass, just as I'd suspected he would. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "I've got to go," he said, stepping back from the embrace. "Duty calls and all that. I've got a flight out of Atlanta tonight. Better hit the road if I want to make it. But if you call, I'll come running." "Thanks," I said. "I appreciate it. You're a good man, Frank McAvoy, even if you hide it well." He laughed all the way out the door. Chapter 82. I had offered, without a huge amount of enthusiasm, to pick Eric up at the airport, but he had declined. He texted us once to tell us he was at Newark, and again a couple of hours later to tell us he'd landed at Atlanta. He texted a little after 6 to tell us he'd made it to his hotel in Greenfields and wanted to take us to dinner. "Do I have to?" Madison asked. "Well," I said, "technically, no. Since you're now an adult, you have no legal obligation to go see him at all. If you're desperate not to, I'll make your excuses. But I'd strongly advise you to at least have dinner with him." "Why?" she moaned. "Because he's your dad," I said. "The only dad you've got. So you might as well try to maintain a decent relationship with him. And right now he's probably pretty stressed out, so you would be making the world a better place by being nice to him?" Madison gave me a skeptical look. "Think of it this way," I told her. "By going out to dinner with him this evening and being reasonably polite to him, you will reduce the amount of suffering in the world. And you will probably benefit from it materially yourself, in the form of plane tickets, tuition, room and board. You get the picture." "That sounds so cynical," she said. "Like I'm just being nice to him so he'll buy me stuff. I don't want to be nice to him so he'll buy me stuff. I want him to be nice to me instead of trying to buy me off with stuff." "Maybe you should tell him that," I said. She gave me an even more skeptical look. However, she allowed me to drive her over to the hotel, which was an upscale affair on the far side of campus. Greenfields, thanks to the college, had a small but very nice downtown that included a 5-star hotel with a fancy fusion cuisine restaurant, as well as a smattering of elegant boutiques and faux English tea shops. I hardly ever went there, because there was nothing there I could afford, but it added an air of elegance to what otherwise would have been a cheap southern town in the middle of nowhere. Eric was pacing the hotel lobby when we arrived. As usual, he was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my whole wardrobe, but today it was rumpled and tired-looking, like he'd thrown something on at 6 a.m. and slept on the plane in it. His haircut probably cost more than... I rarely spent money on my hair, so I didn't know what to compare it with, but it was also expensive. And right now, even more rumpled than his suit. I guessed he'd been running his hands through it in his distraction. "Thank God," he said when we stepped inside. He came over and grabbed Madison by the shoulders as if he wanted to hug her. She stiffened. He stopped himself from going for the full hug and looked her over. "Your face," he said. "It looks so bad. I thought you said you weren't hurt." "Chill, Dad," she said. "It's nothing. Just a bruise. No biggie. The paramedics said I'm going to be fine." "Your nose is swollen and you have 2 black eyes. That doesn't look like nothing. We'll get you checked out first thing tomorrow, as soon as we're back in New Jersey." "I want to go back to New York," Madison said. A distinctly sullen edge was creeping into her voice. "I want to go back to Aunt Sybil." "Sybil may not want you back, Madison. And in any case, it's best for us to be together right now. We need to support each other and present a united front as a family, what with your mother's situation." Madison opened her mouth, clearly about to argue further. Then she caught my eye, and to my astonishment said, "That's a good point, Dad. How is Mom? Have you talked to her yet?" He shook his head. "They haven't let me speak to her yet. I think the only person allowed access to her right now is her lawyer. Or maybe she doesn't want to talk to me. She must be feeling..." He trailed off, unable to come up with the words for how she must be feeling. I repressed any thoughts of however bad she was feeling. It probably wasn't bad enough. Was she rethinking her involvement with Carrie, Vadim, and their ilk? Somehow I doubted it. Probably she was just doubling down on her convictions now. "Anyway," Eric said. He cleared his throat and looked over at me. "It's good to see you, Rowena, although I wish it had been under more auspicious circumstances. Are we all ready to go into the dining room? What happened to your leg? Was that from the altercation?" "It's an old injury," I said. I had, with more pride than sense, disdained the crutches for the evening, but I had my knee in a brace and was using a cane. "It just got a little re-aggravated during the fight." Eric winced at the word fight, and again when he saw my hobble as we started towards the dining room. "You'll have to tell me if you need help with this, Rowena," he said as we made our slow way across the lobby. "I know how expensive some of these specialists can be. Does the college provide benefits for contingent faculty? I imagine it's not great." "They do," I said, "and it's not great, but there's not a lot you can get done around here anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much most of the time." "Still," he said, "let me know if you need any help with that. It's only fair." I gave him a polite smile. He was perfectly right in assuming that I wouldn't be able to afford any kind of extensive treatment on my own. And it probably was right of him to offer to help pay for it, since I had sustained my injury while protecting his daughter. But the thought of owing him anything, even just a favor, didn't sit right with me. I'd owed him before, and it had been fine, and in the grand scheme of things it could be argued that he would be forever in my debt. But still, the thought of getting drawn deeper into his orbit didn't appeal. I had always been chary of taking him up on the various things he had offered me, but had been willing to consider them. Now, though, it felt like my life was heading in a different direction, one that hopefully wouldn't mean having to rely on him. I certainly didn't want to make him my enemy, but I didn't want to make him my patron, with benefits, either. A strained semi-silence hung over the table as we ordered drinks and perused the menu and ordered our food. Eric kept looking back and forth between me and Madison, his face changing from joy to relief to horror to outrage and back again. "How much more of the semester do you have left, Rowena?" he said abruptly, as we were finishing our main course. "Today was the last day of class," I said. He winced. "Tough day to miss." "Actually, I went in and taught," I said. "I didn't have anything better to do, so I decided to go ahead and do it." His face tried to take on several different expressions at once. "Rowena, He glanced over at Madison. "I know we've taken advantage of everything, of you in a way we can't ever truly repay you for, but He shrugged helplessly. Then he said, speaking directly for the first time that evening, "What do you need? How can I help you?" I tried to come up with something that he could give me. He obviously needed to do it, and it might be useful to me, too. But I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. He couldn't single-handedly get me a job, and certainly not one that would be any better than the one I already had. He couldn't fix my relationships. He could pay for treatment for my knee, but that might not actually fix anything. He could give me money, but I didn't want to take money from him. Certainly not for this. "I didn't do any of this for gain," I said. "I know you didn't." He made an angry gesture with his hand. "But I still want to help you out. I need to." I nodded. "I understand. I would feel the same way. But I just can't think of anything right now. Maybe the thing I want most is for you and Madison to get along." He nodded, tiredly. "That would certainly make your life easier." "Not for that reason. Because it would make me feel like the world had become a tiny bit better if you could be kind to each other. Like I'd done some real good in the world. Like everything I'd done hadn't been in vain." Eric smiled lopsidedly. "That's a pretty big ask. But I guess I asked for it, didn't I? I wish I knew how." "Maybe you should ask her," I said, nodding towards Madison. "Yeah, geez. I'm, right here," she said. She was trying to play the part of the sulky adolescent, but she wasn't quite pulling it off. Her voice trembled like she was about to cry. Eric smiled lopsidedly again. "So, Madison, what do you want? What can I get you?" Madison looked over at me. Then she looked back at him and said, "I want you to spend time on me rather than money." Eric went still. "That is a big ask," he said, "but a good one." His voice was starting to shake too. "Excuse me," I said. "I'll be right back." I staggered, away from the table and over towards the ladies' room. I didn't actually have to go, but I figured I'd be more likely to get what I'd ask for if I weren't there. Chapter 83. Madison agreed to spend the night in the hotel room Eric had gotten for her. We met again the next morning for breakfast before they set off for the airport. Madison's swollen nose and black eyes were at their impressive peak. "Everyone's going to think I can't take care of you," Eric said. "And they're right," his face added silently. "Geez, Dad," she said, She tried to roll her eyes and winced. I'm like 21 years old. A grown-up. It's not your job to take care of me anymore. Eric opened his mouth, obviously to argue, then took a deep breath and shut it. Progress. I had done something good here, I told myself. Maybe all I was good for was picking up other people's pieces, but that was a good thing, and I had done it. I wonder what I should tell people, Madison said, prodding speculatively at her nose and wincing again. I mean, it sounds all badass and all until I say I got smacked in the face by a door. That's like so gay. Shit, we're not supposed to say that, right? What should I say instead? Lame? That's so old, though. And maybe problematic in itself, too, I said. You could just go for an oldie but goodie, like embarrassing. Yeah, whatevs. I think I'll go with the truth, but without the most embarrassing parts. I'll just say I got it in a fight. That's true, right? So I wouldn't be lying. I just don't have to say that I got smacked in the face by a door. Sounds good to me, I agreed. After I saw them off to their rental car, I hobbled back to my own car and spent the weekend off my feet as much as possible, in hopes of avoiding another medical visit. By Monday afternoon, when I had my first final, the swelling in my knee had noticeably gone down, to my profound relief. By then the news about Vadim and his gang had gotten out, albeit in simplified form, and the students knew I'd been involved in it somehow. There was a fair amount of curiosity and admiration evinced, along with concern for my knee. I assured them, with a lot more certainty than I felt, that my knee would be recovered by the next semester, and shouldn't interfere with my teaching in any way. And by Friday afternoon, when I had my second final, I was walking with hardly any sign of a hobble at all. I counted that as a major win. I wasn't quite ready to take up running again, but it was starting to seem like a possibility 6 months in the future. When I got home from the exam Friday evening, there was an email waiting for me from the publisher who'd requested the full manuscript of my book last semester. Don't get your hopes up! I prepared myself to read a rejection, probably couched in humiliating terms, with a multi-page explanation of why the readers considered my book unworthy of publication. From what I'd heard, that was the normal hazing procedure done under the guise of giving useful feedback. Dear Rowena, if I may, I read, I am delighted to inform you that the reader feedback on your manuscript was largely positive overall, and we are very interested in publishing it. If you would like to go further with this, please look over the attached contract. At first, I couldn't understand what I was reading. Then I realized this was not a rejection. This was an offer of a book contract. A scream started to well up from somewhere deep within my chest. I swallowed it back, but a small yip of joy still emerged. Fivronia peered out from where she'd been sitting under the table, and then dashed for the safety of the bedroom. I opened the contract, but couldn't make any sense of the small type and legal language. I closed it. I'd read through it later, when I was calmer. I opened the reader comments, hoping to see something encouraging. My eyes immediately fell on the words, "The author doesn't appear to understand the meaning of the terms they use. Insufficient justification for the chosen theoretical basis. Potentially problematic. Amateurish writing style that sometimes borders on the hysterical." I shut that document as well, shuddering to think what kind of comments a book that was actually rejected got. I'd deal with all that later. No doubt it would be exploitative and horrible, but if I could get through that gauntlet, I'd have a published book. I'd have something that I'd actually done, a concrete accomplishment that I could point to for years to come. I responded with a short email saying I'd gotten the letter, I was very interested, and I'd peruse the contract over the weekend and get back to them if I had any questions. Then I turned to the problem of supper. The kitchen felt very empty and quiet without Madison there. I put my laptop on the counter and set YouTube to playing some music videos before starting to make pasta for the third time that week. In the middle of Lindsay Buckingham doing an acoustic version of Trouble, my phone pinged. I picked it up, keeping it carefully away from the steaming water. "Darling Inechka," the message read, "I've been thinking of you. Would you like to have a video chat?" Chapter 84. I started to text a response. Then I pressed the call button instead. Dima answered on the first ring. He was lying back on what I recognized as the fold-out couch that had been our bed when we'd lived together in his and his mother's apartment in Moscow. The lights were off, and his face was grainy and lit by a greeny-orange glow from the screen. "It must be late," I said. "Aren't you afraid of waking up Galina Ivanovna?" "It's after midnight," he said. "Mama's spending the night in the hospital for some tests. I can't sleep. The apartment doesn't feel right without her or you here." "Oh." I swallowed, trying to force down the lump that had suddenly grown in my throat. "I've always had a problem with insomnia," he continued, "ever since I was a little boy, except when you were here with me. Then I slept like a baby." "Oh," I said again. My memory was that he hadn't slept very well when I'd been with him either, but maybe it had been better than at other times. "I've been thinking," he said. "A lot. I've been thinking and thinking about what happened last week." "Oh?" I said. We'd texted a few times since then, mostly me reassuring him that I was fine, and that Vadim was safely locked up and was no longer a danger to me. There was a fair amount of disagreement, I understood, about what to do with Vadim. Some people wanted to hold him in the U.S. and charge him under U.S. law. The Ukrainian government, it seemed, was agitating quietly for him to be shipped back home. He was a war hero and essential for their anti-terrorist operation, after all. But what had actually happened to him was still far from clear. I, cynically, assumed he would be sent home with a slap on the wrist. Unless his case got a lot of publicity and someone did, as Dima had suggested, make a stink about someone with known neo-Nazi ties attacking a couple of unarmed, not counting our kitchen implements, women in their own apartment. Then the Ukrainian government might wash their hands of him, as a sign of the hard line they took against extremists. The likelihood of that seemed vanishingly small to me, though. "Yes," he said. "You know, it was pretty much my worst nightmare. Watching you be in danger, but not being able to do anything about it. Having to sit there completely helplessly while you faced a danger that I'd caused." "It wasn't just you," I said. "In fact, it mostly wasn't you." "I still had a hand in it. I pissed off Vadim and people who are a lot scarier, too. I'm a chaos bomb, Ina. I don't mean to be, but I am." He inhaled deeply through his nose and blew out a breath. "I used to worry a lot about being evil. I still do. But I've come to realize that I'm worse than that." "Worse than evil?" I asked. "How?" "Evil is rational. It's predictable. I know what those corrupt oligarchs I go after want. I know what the people who run organizations like Kovbayets want. I even know what guys like Vadim want. It's all simple and straightforward. They act in accordance with their desires, and their actions have consequences, and other people suffer from those consequences. It's not good, but it's easy to comprehend."
Well, I have desires, but I don't act in accordance with them. I act in accordance with what I think is right, and my actions have consequences, but those consequences are just as likely to have bad outcomes as good ones. And not even I can predict what will happen. I mean to be a hero, but I'm an agent of chaos.
Chaos isn't always bad, I said. Isn't chaos the start of everything else? I think you have to have chaos in order to have life.
Maybe, but you need something other than chaos in order to continue life. You can't just have chaos. But that's all I have.
That's not all you have, I said.
Dima shook his head. I might as well, for all the good I've done. And this time, once again, I set something terrible in motion. I sent Vadim to come after you, even though that was the exact opposite of everything I would have wanted. And then I had to watch while someone else rescued you.
It was good that Frank came, I said.
Is that his name? Frank? He's not your American man, is he? The one in California?
No, I said. He's a friend of his. That was stretching the truth pretty thin, but I didn't want to get involved in lengthy explanations of trivialities.
So he's probably a good man, too.
Sort of, I said. At least, he's a less bad man than I originally thought.
Dima smiled at that. Is he an agent of chaos, too?
I thought about it. Maybe. Not as much as you, though. Dima smiled a little more, but it was a sad smile.
It's good to be special and unique, I guess. Although, I would have liked to be special and unique in a good way.
You are, I said. And Frank helped, but you helped too. Before Frank ever arrived, you were the one who helped me fight Vadim. I had given up. I didn't tell you before, but I had given up. I just wanted to run away.
Running away might have been a good thing to do in that situation, Ina,
Dima said. And leave Madison? Leave her to face Vadim on her own?
Or save her by calling for help, said Dima. But you didn't run. You stayed, and you fought, and you saved both of you.
Yes, I said, and that was all because of you. You didn't run, Dima. You stayed by my side, metaphorically at least, and you helped me. Just when I thought I was going to betray everything I believed in, when I thought I was going to run away and abandon someone who depended on me, you gave me the courage to stay and save her. You weren't an agent of chaos that night, Dima. You were an agent of courage. And I think it might have been the bravest thing I've ever seen you do. I know how hard it was for you to watch that.
You don't know, he interrupted.
I think I do, I told him. How many times have I had to see you in danger? More than I can count. I know exactly how hard it is. But you don't. You've always hidden your face or run away from it. Until that night. That night you didn't turn away, or run away, or abandon me. You stood by me and gave me the courage I needed to live up to my convictions.
Well,
Dima swallowed. He rubbed at the bridge of his nose, rubbing away tears, I realized, or the faintest sheen of moisture that might hint at tears. I'd never seen him cry. I'd never seen him come close to crying. But now he was choking up. You're not evil, I told him, and you're not an agent of chaos. I smiled to overcome the lump in my throat that was threatening to choke me too. Well, not just of chaos. You can be a force for good too, and you are.
I don't know how,
he said. He sounded weaker and more bewildered than I had ever heard him.
I thought I did, but I didn't. And now I don't know what to do.
He scratched at the bridge of his nose again and swallowed hard.
Maybe Mandelstam will tell me, eh?
Maybe, I said.
Everything is moved by love, he said softly.
It is, I agreed.
I don't know what that means, Inechka. And if I did, I don't know that I could live by that rule. But I can try.
That's all any of us are doing, I said. Trying. He took another deep breath. He seemed to be having trouble drawing in air.
I don't know much, Inechka. I've read the story only to the middle, and now I'm cast adrift in these wine-dark seas. And I'm afraid I'll drown in them and drag you down as well.
Or maybe, I said, if you stretch out your hand, you'll pull me to safety.
But I don't know that. You don't know that. No one does.
No, I said, but it's worth trying.
And maybe if I try, I'll be able to bring my actions and my desires together so that they don't work at cross purposes, he said. Or maybe I'll cause even more chaos.
Or maybe you won't, I said.
Or maybe we'll find out. This isn't what I'd meant to tell you. What I'd meant to tell you is that we got our visas, Inechka. Mama and I are coming to America. We'll be arriving in Atlanta on New Year's Day.
That's only 3 weeks away, I said.
It is.
3 weeks seems like a very long time right now, I said. He smiled at that. Then he turned serious again.
I can't promise anything, Ina. I don't even know. All I know is that we're flying into Atlanta on New Year's Day.
I'll come get you at the airport, I said.
You don't have to.
I do have to, I said. He smiled some more at that.
Then maybe this new year will be a new start, Ina. For all of us. Maybe this time we can get it right.
I have faith, I said. Everything is moved by love, after all. I'll meet you at the airport on New Year's Day. The End. From the author. Like the other books in the Dr. Rowena Halley series, Under Review is fiction, but fiction that is heavily inspired by real-world events and my own personal experiences. The basic plotline of U.S. and Ukrainian white supremacists / neo-Nazis engaging in joint training and recruitment activities is closely based on reality, as reported, for example, in Newsweek and Time magazine. The plot to disrupt the 2017 U.S. inauguration is loosely based on the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol building, which included a few Ukraine-trained participants. Rowena's explanation to her students that you have to be white to join a white supremacist organization is pretty much a verbatim description of my own conversations with some of my students who were seduced by the Azov Battalion's snazzy training videos aimed at recruiting adolescents for their youth training camps. Meanwhile, certain aspects of the biography of Vadim Zhirayev are very loosely based on those of various current military and political leaders in Ukraine. This book was written against the backdrop of the phase of the war in Ukraine that began with Russia's full-scale invasion of the country in February 2022. However, that is, in many ways, merely an expansion of a civil war that had been taking place within Ukraine since 2014, which became externalized into a great power conflict / proxy war. This has caused investigations into the Ukraine-based white supremacist movement, always anemic, to come to a grinding halt. Meanwhile, Facebook, for example, removed its ban on posts about the Azov Battalion, allowing further dissemination of pro-Azov content. As of the time of writing, 2023, it's unclear how this will all shake out, but a quick look at, say, Afghanistan does not fill me with confidence. Is the U.S. arming and training the next Taliban/Al-Qaeda/ISIS, but this time in Europe and North America? Already, several mass shooters, most notably the perpetrator of the 2019 Christchurch shooting, have explicitly listed Ukraine and the Ukrainian-based white supremacist movement as a key inspiration for their actions. Meanwhile, Russian neo-Nazis operating out of Ukraine are becoming increasingly emboldened and appear to have considerable support from the Ukrainian, and therefore U.S., government. The post-Maidan Ukrainian government, which evidence increasingly suggests was founded on an act of deliberate betrayal and violence against its own supporters, is also continuing its alarming slide into authoritarianism with a distinctly fascist edge. Only time will tell whether there is more to come. Thank you for listening to Under Review, an academic thriller by Sid Stark. To find out more about the characters, get your free story, and sign up for my mailing list, please visit my website at sidstarkauthor.com. You can also email me at sidstark@sidstarkauthor.com. That was Under Review, an academic thriller, Book 7 in the Dr. Rowena Halley series, by Sid Stark. Copyright 2023. Narrated by Sid Stark. Production copyright 2023.